Welcome to a Final Four edition of Inside the Game with CNHI Sports. I'm George Bremer of CNHI Sports Indiana, and we'll waste no time talking March Madness with Elton Hayes and Kevin Brockway. It's now time to check in with Elton Hayes of CNHI Sports Pennsylvania and Kevin Brockway of CNHI Sports Indiana. And guys, we have finally made it to the Final Four. I think for so many reasons, weren't sure if we would get to this point this year, but here we are, four really good teams, 2 1 seeds, a 2 seed, and then an 11 seed. For the second time, a school has gone from the first four to the Final Four. Kevin, let's start with that. UCLA got something special going on these last couple of weeks with Mick Cronin.
Yeah, and I had a chance to go to that game last night, and I also went to their Sweet 16 overtime win against Alabama, and very impressive what Mick Cronin is doing, particularly defensively, getting his team to kind of grind it out, play grimy possession-by-possession basketball. Tremendously impressive job last night. Now, Michigan without Isaiah Livers, but still, a dangerous team. And, an interesting thing, first time since 2017, no Big Ten teams in the Final Four, with Michigan being eliminated. And you started with 9, and I think everyone went into this tournament thinking that this could be the year that the Big Ten ended their national title drought at 21 years, but it is still counting.
Yeah, I think there's going to be a little bit of a chip collectively on the conference's shoulder when college basketball season starts again in the fall. Elton, we've been talking about them, it feels like all year. Gonzaga now 30-0, the first school ever with 5 straight 30-win seasons. Can anybody stop the Bulldogs?
Honestly, at this point, I'm not betting against them, guys. I mean, while it seems like every other team out there to this point has kind of scratched and clawed to get to the Final Four, Gonzaga's just quietly just chipping away, racking up double-digit point wins, and just no pressure on them at all. It's phenomenal what they've been doing, considering, like I said, this year has been crazy in terms of upsets. Like, mentioned UCLA coming from a play-in game all the way to the Final Four, and Gonzaga is just here, just quietly doing what it does. And it's almost kind of like people are taking them for granted. What they're able to do. 2 wins away from joining very rare company that you had mentioned earlier this year. Can Gonzaga do it, George? And looks like you're 2 games away from that coming true.
Yeah, it's been a pretty crazy run for the Bulldogs. Kevin, I know Bloomington's favorite coach, Kelvin Sampson, leading the Houston Cougars back to the Final Four for the first time since 1984. It's his first trip since 2002. A lot of people say this group at Houston looks a lot like his Oklahoma teams. Do you see that comparison?
Yeah, no, they're another team that really tough defensively, tough-minded group. They're going to rebound. They're going to stop you. And just enough offense with Quincy Grimes. So they're going to be tough in their matchup against Baylor. I'm going to be really interested to see that because you're talking about 2 really good defensive teams. I think the difference from Baylor is they can get it going from 3-point range a little bit. And if they do, I think they will prevail.
Elton, that other opponent, as Kevin mentioned, Baylor, Scott Drew, 18 years, breaks through to the Final Four for the first time. First time the Bears are here in 71 years. That's the second longest drought between Final Fours in NCAA history. Oregon went 77 years. Is Baylor a national championship threat?
I mean, they are. I mean, I don't think many people are not expecting to see Gonzaga and Baylor in the championship. And then from there, I kind of defer to Gonzaga just because they've been doing it all year. But Baylor, I mean, 2 losses, 2 losses this entire season. I believe Baylor is scoring 83 points a game, which is second behind Gonzaga in scoring offense among remaining tournament teams. They're just doing what they do. They really caught fire during the regular season. I mentioned 2 losses. I think the last loss was to Oklahoma State back on March 12th. Which is just a hiccup. They've been kind of like Gonzaga, just chipping away, winning games, kind of people expected at this point. But out of the 4 teams remaining, obviously with Baylor, the fellow number 1 seed is the most threatening to knock Gonzaga off. But I don't see anyone taking Gonzaga right now. They just look too dominant, too tuned in, and I think it's their year.
Certainly, it's not going to be an easy feat to pull off. Kevin, it's pick time. Who's going to win on Saturday, and who cuts the nets down on Monday night?
Yeah, I'm going to go with Gonzaga and Baylor. And then in the championship game, I'm going to go with Baylor. Why not? Let's do something a little different. I think Scott Drew, I think the pressure of being the undefeated team will finally get to them on Monday night.
Elton, same question.
Gonzaga, Baylor. However, I'm going to defer from my esteemed colleague down there in Indiana, and I'm going to go with Gonzaga knocking off Baylor and completing that undefeated season.
Definitely be historic. One thing that I find very interesting, I'd like to get both you guys' thoughts on this. Twice at the Final Four in Indianapolis, an undefeated team has come in here, lost in the national semifinals, UNLV to Duke, I believe, in 1991, and then Kentucky lost to Wisconsin in this round, I believe, in 2015. Does that continue? Is there any possibility Gonzaga falls victim to this, I guess, mini curse?
Yeah. As Kevin mentioned, the pressures, I know this goes contrary to me picking them to win. I expect them to win and breaking that curse, but they've 30 in a row right now. That's a lot of expectations. They really, that's a lot to put on their shoulders to go wire to wire, undefeated, number one. I think there's a reason those teams haven't completed the task, because at the end of the day, it's just a lot of pressure. And if you're Baylor, you've got every incentive in the world for fodder and for locker room material. With Gonzaga, you're expected to do it. So I think mentally that kind of does play a role.
Well, UCLA, too, could slow them down. And I think if UCLA plays its A game and Gonzaga plays, say, it's like C-plus game, I think UCLA is capable of squeaking out a win. I mean, they've done it against Alabama and Michigan, the SEC regular season champion and the Big Ten champion. And they're playing really good basketball. The thing I worry about with UCLA is maybe a little bit of fatigue of playing like the 5 games. You've got a little bit of rest, but I think even Mick Cronin said following the game last night that Jules Bernard is a little banged up. He didn't really give him much offensively last night. They really had to ride Johnny Juzang that whole game, but he was terrific. That's going to be interesting to see on Saturday if they run out of gas. But they could, and the history precedent says that it doesn't happen in the championship game; it happens in the Final Four game.
Yeah, no, that's where it's been, and I guess it's the magic of March. One bad night and you're done. That's all it takes. This is the best of 7 series, not even the best of 3. You don't have your A game on the right night, and it's all over for you, as the Big Ten found out in quite spectacular fashion this year. I'm going to throw you guys a little bit of curveball here real quick. Let's go to the women's side. I know Kevin and I were following Indiana's amazing run to the Elite 8. Connecticut, Arizona, first-time Final Four appearance there for them. Stanford with a big comeback over Louisville to make the field. And South Carolina, who seems to be a mainstay now. Both of you, who are you picking to win the women's national title?
I'm going with Don Staley in South Carolina to just destroy Texas the way South Carolina did last night. Held Texas scoreless in the fourth quarter for the first time in NCAA history. Hey, I was making a joke when Penn State had the coaching vacancy. Don Staley is from Philadelphia. Maybe look at her for coach. She can recruit. We know she can coach, but they've won the championship, I believe, in 2017. My money's on Don Staley and the South Carolina Gamecocks.
I'll go with UConn. I'll go with Gino Auriemma. I know the fix was in a little bit in that Baylor game. Carrington was fouled. We know that, but maybe that's a little bit of destiny for them. It's hard to go against Gino in a Final Four. So I will stick with them, but I will say this: Arizona, Ari McDonald, what a terrific player. Tremendously fast, and she's going to be tough to stop. And if she can continue playing at that level, Arizona could be a sleeper in there as well.
Yeah, I found this interesting. Minnesota, kind of the capital of the basketball world right now. Jalen Suggs, star point guard at Gonzaga, likely on his way to the NBA next year. And then Paige Beckers, UConn star freshman, just named the player of the year by the AP, first freshman ever to do that. Both grew up in Minnesota, really good friends. Suggs said he was kind of pacing his hotel room watching the UConn game the night before. Just kind of an interesting subplot here in the Final Four. Outside of the tournament, Kevin, big news in Bloomington. Mike Woodson, former Knicks head coach, former Hawks head coach, former Hoosiers point guard, taking over as the head coach at IU.
Yes, yeah, and I think it's a hire that's very well received because of his lineage, his connection to Bob Knight, his connection to the Indiana program, and his success in the NBA. I mean, the question is whether it will translate, but I've had a chance to talk to a few people that believe it will, because one of the attributes of Mike Woodson, his track record, is he's taken very young teams. He took a very young Hawks team, got them the playoffs. He took a young Knicks team and got them the playoffs, and a very good developer of talent. And that goes a long way in college basketball. I mean, you take a look at the elite programs, Mark Few at Gonzaga and Jay Wright at Villanova. What do? They develop players. It's not necessarily, the one and dones anymore of Kentucky in 2012 and Coach K. It's about getting old and staying old. And I think under Mike Woodson, Indiana has a chance to kind of build that foundation. Don't think it's going to happen overnight, but if they're patient with him in 2 or 3 years, I think he's going to get that program to the level that Hoosier fans want it to be.
Certainly a very interesting hire here in Indiana. Elton, I know you're working on a feature that's going to come out later with all of our CNHI papers, but a very interesting trend here in the Big Ten. Minnesota, IU, Penn State, all hiring new head coaches this offseason. All three of them new black head coaches. What do you make of this?
The Big Ten has kind of prided itself on being progressive, kind of setting the standard for college athletics. We noticed this in football. While the numbers, aren't at 50%, they have a large amount of black head coaches in the Big Ten in football, and we see basketball kind of catching up to speed. What's interesting is 2 years ago, there weren't any black head coaches in the Big Ten. Juwan Howard changed that 2 seasons ago when he hired him at Michigan, and now there are 4 black head coaches in the Big Ten. We spoke with Micah Shrewsbury, a name that you all know very well down there in Indiana. He was had his introductory press conference yesterday, and I asked him, what does this mean for the conference, and what advice he would give others who look like him who are looking to get into Power 5 head coaching positions. And he was just saying that he carries that weight on his shoulders. In addition to the wins and losses, he wants to kind of get in that position, show that it's possible, and be kind of a torchbearer for others. So it's very exciting. We still have a long way to go in terms of numbers with head coaches, especially in the Power 5 numbers. Interesting enough, D3 is the numbers are a lot better at that level, but it's promising. I think other conferences will catch on and do the same.
Yeah, I hope so. 4 out of 14, still not a really great percentage, but definitely Big Ten heading in the right direction this offseason. Well, guys, thanks a lot for your time. I know it's going to be very interesting. I think Final Four weekend. We should have a lot to talk about again next week. Thanks as always to Elton and Kevin for their time. You can follow Elton's coverage of the Penn State Nittany Lions at EHDC12 on Twitter. You can follow Kevin and the Indiana Hoosiers at Kevin Brockway G1. Now let's check in for an Oklahoma perspective on this Final Four with Clay Horning of CNHI Sports Oklahoma. Now it's time for our weekly spot with Clay Horning. And Clay, someone very familiar both in Oklahoma and Indiana basketball circles. Kelvin Sampson returning to the Final Four with the Houston Cougars. It's the first time since he took the Sooners there in 2002. You have quite the history with Coach Sampson.
Yeah, I do. I can start by saying when he left OU, and I wrote a column in sort of the aftermath of it, I wrote about the chip on his shoulder, and my last line was, I hope he finds peace, and I hope Oklahoma can find a coach that already has. And I don't know if he's found it. It's like I look forward. I read what he had to say, via ASAP Sports, which provides transcripts of post-game stuff after winning his Elite Eight game, and it's like some of it was so vintage Kelvin. He managed to bring up Judd Heathcote more than once. He managed to name drop, got Magic Johnson in there, but it's always, it's like you never know if he wants to be humble badly. Just as badly, he wants you to know how far he's come. So he talks about coaching in Montana and Washington State and everything. And so it's like of all the meetings I don't look forward to is one where should we have to cross paths, because by the end of it, I was not his biggest fan, and nor was he mine. And it's just, he's a really interesting guy. And I when we began chatting about this before, we actually started, I never even thought of this moment, but I remember being at the Final Four in 2002, and this was a time when all the newspapers brought in their national guys and their columnists, and they're sort of like, Hollis Price is going to get a big feature written about him, and Bob Ryan of the Boston Globe did that one. And Kelvin is going to, you become a national figure for a little while. And I remember somebody asking Kelvin, like, how bad was it? Because I think he worked in warehouses where there was tobacco and stuff, because he was from that part of the country as a kid. And how can you describe how far, something like that, like from those humble beginnings. And Kelvin goes, "Where are you from?" And I was like, Kelvin is getting prickly because he's sort of making a show of, you come from this, whatever. Like, Kelvin thought he was about to be condescended to, and he was ready to lock horns. And the guy said, Raleigh. And he goes, "Oh, well, then And so he immediately relaxed, like, oh, this guy's not coming after me. But he was ready. And that's sort of Kelvin. And you can see it in his teams. I don't think he's got any NBA players on his team at Houston, perhaps. He had no NBA players at OU. Hollis Price was Eduardo Najera might have had a cup of coffee, but they won. In fact, they were a 13 seed at large in his fourth tournament at OU when he finally won a game in the NCAA tournament, having lost in the first round of his first 3 years at OU. So they were literally the last team in the tournament, and I think they shocked Arizona, and then they lost to Mateen Cleave's Michigan State team in the round of 16, and Najera was on that team. But that's the only NBA player I think he ever coached at OU. And his teams are, quote, blue collar, and that's the way he likes it. And I always thought he did more with less, and he also did less with more. When he started getting better recruits, better, quote, prospects in the aftermath of going to a Final Four and an Elite Eight, those teams were not nearly as successful. So and I just hope, it's like, I'm sort of happy for him. But I just wonder where he is in his life. If he feels like he's still trying to prove himself, which is always where he's been, or if he's sort of like, yeah, I've been a very successful college coach. I don't have to make any apologies. I know he wanted to be an NBA coach. It didn't happen for him. He was on the bench at Houston for some time, and I mean, I think he thinks he might have had Quinn Snyder's career, and Quinn Snyder, sort of, he was at Missouri and had some player problems. And I mean, Quinn Snyder the last guy you thought would be a successful NBA coach in terms of just would ever get the opportunity was Quinn Snyder, because around, I don't know if it was 03 or 07. I mean, it all runs together now, but he was sort of chased out of Missouri, and then the program was falling upon hard times in the wake of his tenure. So anyway.
I wonder what the view is of Sampson out in Oklahoma. I know here in Indiana, he's public enemy number one. He's a villain because his run with the Hoosiers obviously ended with an NCAA scandal, and it took IU quite some time at the start of the Tom Crean era to get out of that mess. I think they had like 4 scholarship players or something. So there's a lot of view of him as the bad guy here in Indiana. Yeah. I wonder what the view is at Oklahoma.
Well, I would say it is mostly positive. But a lot of those people who are really cheering him now, who will be on, I don't listen to a lot of sports radio, but who I promise you have been on sports radio, calling in saying, I wish he could have come back here. I mean, I promise you, when he left, he'd worn them out too. So anyway, he even had this line in his post game. He said, when I got to Houston, Joe Castiglione sent me a ladder, like it was real, but it was metaphorical type thing. It was a physical object, but it was, and he referred to Joe Castiglione, Oklahoma's athletic director, as one of his best friends. And I read that and went, does Castiglione know you're one of his best friends? I mean, now I could be wrong, but I mean, he puts the program on probation. He bops to Indiana. It's a big mess. I mean, or maybe they've just, later in life that they've become close again. Maybe that could well be the case. I would hope for that. But it was just I started with yes, people wish they had his success here again, but I think a lot of people conveniently forget that they didn't really love his basketball because they didn't like watching games that were 56-54. Or even I think they scored 38 against Kansas one year. I remember our big headline was a new low, and it was literal and in more than one way. But it was so I think it's mostly positive for all that he accomplished, but it is sort of forgetful of that he was a lot to deal with. And by the end, he was going to NITs and not NCAA tournaments, and they were going on probation. So mostly positive, but yeah, but checkered nonetheless, I would say.
No, I just want to. It's kind of an interesting situation there because he's had success everywhere he's been, but obviously had to spend sort of an exile there in the NBA for a little while. Comes back to Houston when a lot of people didn't want that job, and clearly shows he's still got it, getting them back to the Final Four for the first time since 1984. The other big story in the national semifinals, Gonzaga. They've been on this quest all year. It's been kind of quiet, starting to pick up steam now. People starting to notice 30-0. Can the Bulldogs pull this off? Can they be the first unbeaten national men's basketball national champion since Indiana in 1975-76?
Am I correct that it's Houston and Gonzaga in one semifinal and
Houston and Baylor?
Oh, okay, all right. Well, wouldn't it be something? Gosh, you look at. It's just interesting to me that UCLA is, but for its name, is a Cinderella, and Gonzaga is the big favorite, the blue blood. Well, yeah, I mean nobody's played Gonzaga even close, so there's no reason to think they won't win it. And as we were just chatting about, I mean, I hope they do because it's cool. It's even cooler because it's them, and it's even cooler. I did not realize that, as you just told me, that Indiana people hold on to that unbeaten 76 team in the same way the Larry Zonka, Bob Greasy, Don Shula coached Miami Dolphins would toast the last unbeaten team's first loss. Each NFL season. Yeah, well, yeah, they need the company. I mean, they need somebody else to go unbeaten. They've got a coach that makes no headlines for the wrong reasons. And as far as I know, graduates his players and runs a clean program too. So don't throw me that about Bobby Knight. Doesn't give you the right to, be a jerk still, no matter your success. And so anyway, yeah, it's time. I hope they win.
45 years is a long, long time to stand alone.
It's unbelievable. It's almost half a century, and yet because it happened in your lifetime, and I have a vague memory of it, of Indiana being that team. The one I really remember is the Marquette National Championship, which might have been the next season. Al McGuire, the coach. In fact, they had a classic victory in a regional over UNC Charlotte in Oklahoma City. But anyway, yeah, it doesn't seem that long because it happened in my lifetime, and players that I grew up watching the NBA were playing at that time, but it was a long time ago. That's 45 years. That's insane. It's crazy that the coach of that team is even still alive.
Yep.
But Bob Knight was probably not 40 at that time in his life. So crazy.
Pretty insane to think about. Well, thanks a lot for your time, Clay. Yeah. And I'm sure that we'll have plenty to talk about again next week after we get through this Final Four.
Right. And I look forward, not that I have my arms around every baseball team, but at some point I'm going to write about how to fix baseball. So anyway, we'll be talking about baseball, I guess, soon enough. So that'll be cool.
Opening day on Thursday.
All right, cool.
Thanks a lot.
You bet. See you later.
Thanks as always to Clay for his time. You can follow our national sports columnist at Clay Horning. Now let's check in on a crazy NFL offseason and talk some quarterbacks with Bill Burt of CNHI Sports Boston. Now it's time for our weekly spot with Bill Burt. And Bill, not a surprise to anybody, quarterbacks all the rage this time of year. Pro days getting going. Everybody's going viral. What do you make of the quarterback frenzy right now in the NFL?
It's interesting. They've been done playing football since mid-January for a couple of quarterbacks, but most of them done in late January, early January, late December. But what happens when they don't play, we overthink things. And when we overthink things, we all of a sudden move guys while they're not playing. So their work is their work. Now there are meetings. They go visit players. You have talks, and hey, that guy didn't give me the good answers or whatever. But the quarterbacks for me are laughable, and this happens every year. It's happening now every year because we all know how important the quarterback position is. So everyone overpays for the position. So now everybody's a top 6 pick. And, before, Mac Jones, Patriots can get Mac Jones. You might get him in the 2nd round. Trey Lance, 3rd round. Don't worry. He'll be there. He's a project. Justin Fields, who was talked about as being 1-2, now he's talking about being 3, 4, or 5. So he dropped, even though he ran a 4.44 and, threw that crazy Zach Wilson pass that everyone's throwing now. So in my opinion, it's laughable. What happened? This is what's happened. You have talked about this. The off season in the NFL is as important as the season, and we treat the draft as fun because look, everyone's great in the draft. Everyone's laughing. Everyone's hugging and crying. And then camp comes. 3 of the guys stink, and 3 of the 7 are lousy. The 2nd round pick, is hurt all the time, and reality sets in. So I don't fall for the hype. I hate to say I wouldn't even go to these things, but I would only use it as a tool. I wouldn't make a decision. Okay, I wasn't going to draft him, but now I'm going to draft him because of this. Now, I think the one thing you see is you see the body, you see the physical aspect of it. And I think that's important. But you can see that at the Senior Bowl, or you can go out, you can see it at a bowl game, you watch during the interview. So I'm not falling for it. I think some teams are. And, we saw it at the pro day at Alabama, the Patriots were there, the San Francisco 49ers were there. Josh McDaniels, former Colts coach for about 2 days, he was there. So in my opinion, it's more fun, it's entertainment. But it's amazing because we might have 5 of the top 5 guys in the draft could be quarterbacks.
Yeah. I think Josh McDaniels was only the Colts coach for about 12 hours, but it's a memorable tenure here in Indy. We were talking before we went on the air too. I mean, it's not a new thing. Kyle Bowler, I remember when he was coming out in the draft and everyone's falling in love with him, and he was throwing the ball through the goalpost from the 50-yard line on his knees. Years before that, Jeff George at the combine overthrowing receivers intentionally. Is there a tendency to fall too in love with the strong arm and forget about the things that win Super Bowls, like Tom Brady's intangibles?
Yes. So I'm going to say this. I'm going to say it's too early to fall in love with quarterbacks. No, it's too late to fall in love with quarterbacks. So here's the deal, in my opinion. Of the top 5 quarterbacks, get ready. We might not want to put this out there in Jacksonville and Atlanta, maybe a couple cities, New York. 3 of these guys are going to be backups. Now, they're going to start, but they're going to be backups, in my opinion, in 3 years, 4 years. One of them is going to be Dak Prescott. He's going to be, he's pretty good. And then one of them is going to be very good and maybe leads the team to a Super Bowl. So that's 5, 3 bums, 1 Dak, and 1 very good, maybe great quarterback. So that's the truth. That's the way this always happens. 1983 was different. We had 6 quarterbacks drafted, 4 of them were Hall of Famers, and that's not happening though. No, you think it's going to happen, but every year this happens. We talk every year at this time about quarterbacks who keep moving down, because I understand the position's important. I'm not falling for it.
San Francisco apparently is. I think that's where the intrigue really begins in this draft. We know, or we think we know, that Trevor Lawrence is headed to Jacksonville. All indications are Zach Wilson's on his way to the Jets. Here come the 49ers moving up the draft board to number 3. And the big mystery is, who are they going after? Right. And then what does this ultimately mean for Jimmy Garoppolo?
Yeah. Okay. So I've written this and I'm going to stick to it. Jimmy Garoppolo is gone. They're lying. White lie. It's sports. We can live with the white lie. Jimmy's gone. And you don't bring in a quarterback. And then see, Jimmy's contract is, if you believe he's good enough to play, it's $24 million for 2 years each year. That's $48 million, $49 million. So that's, I don't want to say that's affordable, but it's affordable. And so he's gone. I think this is a total ruse. My opinion is I would probably move on from him too. They've had him. They made a run at the Super Bowl, but he gets hurt too much. He got hurt here when he played the 4 games that Brady missed in 2016. He only played 2 of them. He looked good, but he only played 2 of them. His problem is, in my opinion, holds the ball too long and gets hit. So he rolls out a little, gets hit. And, that's not where Brady gets rid of the ball. Get rid of the ball. So, in my opinion, I think he's gone. Would he come to New England? The Patriots are not going to overpay for him. They're going to play. Look, they gave they only got a 2nd-round pick, which you could argue was not enough. They're going to say, nope, 3rd-round pick is the most you're getting. Maybe there's a team out there that will. I don't know if there's a team out there that will. I mean, I think he's a pretty good quarterback. Is he? I don't know. Is he as good as Dak Prescott? I don't know. Maybe he's Dak Prescott. That's not a Super Bowl guy. That's a guy who could, be the face of the franchise. I'm not sold on Jimmy. I like him. I don't love him.
I think it's going to be really interesting to see, but I tend to agree with you. When you hear things like he's our starter for 2021, a lot of times that's just NFL code for, you really got to give us something. We're not giving him away for free.
Yeah, they're lying. They're flat out lying. I don't believe it. And you don't move up to number 3 to draft a quarterback. So I'm for quarterback sitting for a bit, but what they're doing there is they're trying to get the Jimmy pick up higher. So make it someone give him an early 2nd rounder for Jimmy. You know what? That's decent. And then you bring a veteran in to back up whoever it's going to be. They're saying Mac Jones, which is interesting. I just think, and you better be right. If you're not, first of all, this is my favorite column every year. If you screw up drafting a quarterback, which most teams do, the coach is fired and the GM is fired. So it's all fun. Hey, have your party. Everyone high five in the draft room when you get him. If he stinks, you're losing your job in 3 years.
No doubt about it. I mean, and especially if you trade up to number 3 to do it, you had better be right. The other big news in the league, non-quarterback related, a 17-game schedule becomes official. I know the NFL Network was putting out a whole host of games that now will happen in 2021 that previously weren't on the schedule. I know where I stand on this. I wonder what your thoughts are about the 17-game schedule being a reality on the NFL.
I'm not for it. I'm for less. And so here's what happened. They weren't going to get this through until COVID killed them. So, I'm going to be talking to Bob Kraft real soon. We're going to hear, oh, you don't understand all the billion, we lost $11 billion between, the league and the teams. And I get the losses. It's true. So this is the right time. They were going to wait, I think, till next year to ask for this, the year after, 2022. But you know what? No, we need our money. So one less preseason. So they're not. Remember before we heard it would be 2 preseason games and 1. No. They're only giving up 1. Remember, these preseason games are very profitable. That's why they didn't. Why do they play 4? There's no reason to play 4 because they make money. They charge the same ticket prices for the most part. You have local advertising. You have your own TV. You make all the money. You don't share it like we do the regular season. So I think it's a given. And I disagree with it. I think less injuries, less concussions, less everything. But nobody's going to listen to a sports writer.
No, and I agree 100%. I think you're going to have more injuries. I think you're just going to end up with more games that don't matter at the end of the year. I think that 17th game is going to be what Week 16 is now, and Week 16 may stay that way. We may have twice as many games depending on how the races go where people aren't playing and it's just, the preseason all over again. But you're right. Money makes the world go round, especially in the NFL. Bill, I know you got to go. You got to talk with Bob Kraft. Thanks a lot for your time. I'm sure as we get close to the draft, we'll have even more quarterback talk again next week.
I love it. I love talking bums quarterbacks. But let's talk next week. Good to talk to you. Best of the family.
Thanks again to Bill. You can follow his coverage of the New England Patriots at Burt Talk Sports, and you can follow my coverage of the Indianapolis Colts at GM Bremer. Thanks again to all of you, and we'll go inside the game again with you right here next week.